Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Thursday, September 10th. I'm Edward Nguyen, your host for Collectibles and Coffee. Today, we'll be looking at Zendikar Rising. We more or less have all the information about the set itself. So this is going to be an initial look. We'll look at some news, try and catch you up. Maybe you're not familiar with everything that's going on, especially because there is a lot going on. Zendikar Rising is something that is a little bit different from traditional releases, from what we've seen. So we'll kind of go through, we'll unpack everything, look at spoilers, look at some news that's surrounding it, look at the different products, and then maybe some cards that I think may be underrated and where we want to get in early as a place to put your money, maybe stay ahead of the curve. Today, my beverage choice is just water, nothing too interesting. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. So looking at the product itself, a few months ago they had announced that there are some different products. Most notably is the introduction of set boosters. Set boosters are a bit of a deviation from your traditional draft boosters, which is what they've dubbed your 36 booster box. 15 cards, meant to be drafted, played for limited. You're probably still going to be your go-to for just opening packs to get cards. The set boosters, a bit of a deviation, as mentioned, from the official Wizards page with the product overview. Set boosters are described as the following. While draft boosters are perfect for, drafting, we wanted to create a booster that was just super fun to open. Enter the set booster. Set boosters are a joy to look through from start to finish. Each pack is carefully constructed to take you on a little bit of a journey, culminating in up to 4 rares or mythics and a guaranteed foil. For a detailed breakdown, watch for a video from Good Morning Magic. Otherwise, here's a surface level breakdown. These are the contents of the pack. Up to 4 rares, 1 foil in every pack. 1 in 4 packs contain a card from the list, which we'll be revealing in full next week. There are some cool alternate frames too, detailed below in the draft booster section. 1 art card, 1 in 20 are foil stamped, 1 token/ad card, 12 game cards in total. Set boosters are available individually or in booster displays of 30 packs. Each display contains 1 expedition box topper and is eligible for 1 buy a box promo while supplies last. Details on those below. All right, so there's a lot going on here. So let's kind of break it down and what we get inside. So the biggest difference is there's more cards per pack, right? You have 4 rares, 1 foils, 5. I assume the card can either be from the list, so that's 6. There's 12 total. They mentioned there's 12 game cards in total. So a little bit less than a traditional booster pack, but it's a little bit more curated. There seems to be a little bit higher value, as it were, per pack. You can get up to 4 rares per pack. They did mention 4 rares or mythics. It's unlikely we'll get a clear breakdown on what that looks like. I imagine that similar to Double Masters, we probably won't ever see a double mythic pack. In Double Masters, it was not possible to open up a double mythic pack. I imagine that similarly here, we probably won't see a 4 mythic pack as well. I know there was some backlash. There were some issues with people complaining that the description was misleading, since mythic rares implies in Double Masters that you could get plural, more than 1 mythic rare per pack, which was simply not the case. The best you could do was 1 mythic, 1 rare. That did lead to some backlash. There was a period of time when if you did buy one of these products, you could actually cut out the UPC, send it in, and then they'll send you a pack in return. So back to the set booster. It seems like this is kind of a middle ground, something that exists between people that just want to open up draft boosters, which are primarily meant to be plate limited. It's probably not the most efficient way to get cards. Set boosters, it seems like with up to 4 rares, it's a little bit more efficient to be opening these if your goal is to be picking up as many of the rares, kind of the alternate cards, as opposed to just opening up a draft pack, which in reality is meant to be used for draft. So with 4 rares, 1 foil in every pack, 1 card from a list, which we'll discuss shortly, 1 art card. Clearly, again, this falls in kind of a different space. These are meant for people that maybe don't necessarily care about drafting, just kind of a cooler way to open packs. If you only buy 1 or 2 packs a week, it kind of feels bad when you only get 1 rare. Realistically, there's probably not a lot of cards that matter to you. You might get an uncommon that's kind of cool, but if your rare is a bust, then your pack is most likely going to be a bust as well. Here, with up to 4 rares, you can probably kind of mitigate that feel bad. The art cards, 120 are foil stamped. Those were kind of a cool introduction. They were reasonably well received when Modern Horizons came out. In terms of value, there's not a lot of them. I imagine that this is something that will get saturated pretty quickly, mainly because there's pretty heavy diminishing returns on how many you can sell. If you look at the art cards from Modern Horizons, a lot of stores are pretty flush with them. I imagine if you go to your local game store and they opened up any amount of Modern Horizons, they'll probably have a box of just art cards for you to sell. A lot of people are trying to sell them as full sets of, I want to say like 60 or 64 or something. Again, they're cool, they're novel. The fact that they're introducing foil stamped ones, maybe a page that they take out of some other TCGs that do have kind of these foil premium products that are stamped, that do, I believe when I saw a preview, I think the foil stamp had the artist's signature on it. It's kind of a cool nod. There are some Japanese TCGs that are kind of big on doing these stamp things. Their sports cards usually have some sort of stamping if the product is particularly unique. Serial numbers on cards with low print runs are particularly big in other TCGs as well. I imagine that this is just them trying to take a page out of that book and capitalize on it. So the biggest thing about set boosters, and one that we'll delve a little bit more into here, is the line that says 1 in 4 packs, 25% of the packs contain a card from the list. So what is the list? So the list is something that they spoiled. Yesterday when they spoiled it in full on Twitter, they basically showed a video where they flashed through every single card on the list. Each image was shown for maybe like a quarter of a second or something. It was very, very fast. They went through the whole list. And this morning rather, they spoiled the full list. The article's up on the Wizards main page. And then this was the description that they have of the list. What exactly is the list? Well, one of the coolest parts of Magic is its history. So we're pulling a trick from Time Spiral and Mystery Booster. We've chosen a list of 300 interesting cards from Magic's past. This is the list. Found in set boosters, cards from the list will appear in the final slot of the pack about 25% of the time. The list has commons, uncommons, rares, and mythic rares, which will fall at the proper rate to one another. Excuse me. Being on the list does not make cards standard legal. They are legal in whatever formats the cards are already legal in. The cards can be pulled from anywhere in Magic's 27-year history. The plan is for the list to change subtly from set to set, bringing cards that might make sense with the set we're in, but it will mostly stay intact from set to set, meaning you'll all get to learn what cards are in the list. Note for the list below, the card image that appears may not match the version found on the list. See the set identifier on the right for the version included in the list. Okay, so 300 cards, that's what this current list is. Set boosters appears 25% of the times. It does contain the full spectrum of rarity. They do fall at the proper rate to one another, so a mythic rare will be substantially more than your common. So you kind of have a small pack inside a pack, as it were, with the list itself. So the most important things to note here that I found particularly interesting are the plan is for the list to steadily change from set to set, bringing in cards that might make sense with the set we're in, but it will mostly stay intact from set to set, meaning you will all get to learn what cards are in the list. The first line is really what I find interesting. The plan is for the list to change subtly from set to set. So with the introduction of Mystery Boosters, when it first came out this past year, It was a big set, right? We're looking. I think the funnest spoiled amount was like close to 1,600 cards. Pretty difficult to assemble the full set. There's just so many. They're all reprints, and the way Mystery Booster is marketed is they're all meant technically to be the same rarity, due to the way they appear on a sheet. Each slot inside a Mystery Booster contains a card on a 121 card sheet. So your packs are pretty dynamic. You're unlikely ever to open the same pack twice. The presence of the list is, I imagine, largely a derivative of that. They have these cards. This is their goal to reprint, to provide reprints for some of these cards coming in. I haven't seen any official information on it, but from what I gather, I think I saw some people saying that these cards will be stamped in such a way similar to how Mystery Booster is stamped, to identify that these cards came from the list, these cards came from Zendikar set boosters, rather than the original printing of the card itself. So the full list is spoiled. We'll go through and look at some of the cards here. One interesting thing to note about the list is that this is something that is going to change from set to set. It seems like this is something that Wizards does want to keep. And if set boosters do well, this is probably something that we'll see introduced. To provide some historical context to this, when they reference Time Spiral and Mystery Booster, I thought it was particularly interesting. It is worth noting that the first printing of Zendikar was when they initially included Priceless Treasures. As we discussed in one of the previous lists, this was when they included cards that they had bought up from various vendors, and they would insert them into Zendikar packs at a very, very low rarity. It was possible to open up Power. Again, remember, this is 2007. The market is very different than it was today. It was possible to open up Dual Lands. It was possible to open up Reserve List cards. It's interesting to me that they didn't mention that. There are some issues with them mentioning Zendikar and the Priceless Treasures themselves. It is technically a bust in the sense that that's not something that they can actively talk about, because the rarities of opening up a Priceless Treasure was not explicitly stated on the booster pack. That borders falling into the realm of gambling. There are some issues, I imagine, that would arise from that if they were to do something similar again. That's why you see that the Priceless Treasures themselves are not well mentioned. It's not well documented. It's not something that Wizards employees will actively talk about if you ask them about it. So that's why they refer to Time Spiral and Mystery Booster as opposed to the original Zendikar, which is, again, kind of in theme with what this were. Battle for Zendikar, the reprint or the remake of the original Zendikar block, obviously had the initial expeditions. That was kind of their way of doing Priceless Treasure, something neat that you could open inside booster packs. And now with Zendikar Rising, they're taking it one step further with introduction of the set boosters. So if we look at the list, we'll kind of go through. I'm not going to go through a full list here. It's 300 cards. There are some pretty interesting ones in here. So it is worth noting, this is the way that they can introduce reprints. This is something that they have talked about before. On Magic Online, there's something that they have called treasure chests. It's kind of a way for them to put reprints into the Magic Online economy. Magic Online doesn't have the full spectrum of Magic the way paper Magic does. A lot of it is curated. Even when Magic Online first came out, I believe in 1999, at that time, right, that's Magic has already been out for 5 years at that point. They started producing sets forward. There's a period of time when Invasion, Planeshift, Apocalypse, some of the first sets that did appear on Magic Online were very, very expensive and very, very rare because they didn't have a lot of those cards. Since then, they have gone back and introduced kind of these older sets with curated lists similar to Masters, Modern Masters, Ultra Masters, etc., where really their goal is to introduce cards that people would be wanting that are relevant for their respective formats. That way, Legacy can exist in its entirety. You don't have odd gaps in Legacy because a card like Peacekeeper, for example, a Weatherlight card, was printed prior to the introduction of Magic Online, and technically doesn't exist on Magic Online in its current iteration, so they had to make these special sets. Tempest Remastered was one example where Tempest, if you look at Tempest, a lot of the cards don't really matter, right? But they want to be able to introduce Wasteland. They want to be able to introduce Allurin, right? These various cards that do have a spot in competitive Magic that that people do want to be able to showcase, be able to play in Legacy, that they have to introduce. So these treasure chests would have a curated list, not unlike the list we have here, and it would have a list that they would show, and cards would show up at different rarities. Again, not unlike this. There were cards, your more desirable cards would show up less frequently in treasure chests. Your commons, uncommons would show up more often. And that was something that they could change dynamically. The list would slowly be adjusted over time as cards started coming into the Magic Online economy. Some cards would be phased out. Some cards that weren't interesting would be phased out. And that was kind of a way to keep the price on cards in check and a way for them to basically introduce these new cards or reprint some of these old cards into treasure chests as people played, and gave players a way to get their hands on them. So the list itself, right, I'm just scrolling through here. There's a pretty wide spread. I just pull up the first 5 cards on here. We have a Braid. It's interesting to note that they chose to use the Game Day full art promo as opposed to using the original art for a Braid itself. Excuse me. I imagine part of this is because the Braid is in Double Masters. It has the same art. May not be the most interesting thing to print again. Acorn Catapult. This is the Commander printing, a Chroma's Memorial, a pretty big EDH Commander card. From Future Sight in 2013. They're using the original Future Sight version. Alpha Kavu, an uncommon from Plane Shift, and Amoeboid Changeling from Lorwyn, a common. So just the first 5 cards themselves, you can see a pretty wide spread. I'm not really sure how they chose this thematically. I'm not really sure how Amoeboid Changeling or a Chroma's Memorial specifically relates to Zendikar itself. There's clearly some financial decisions here. They have to, if the goal is to use set boosters and the list as a way to introduce reprints without necessarily needing to wait for a master set to be introduced, then they would obviously want to have a wide spectrum of cards. Obviously, some cards have to be valuable. Thumbing through a little bit here, a little bit further. Some cards of substantial value. Beseech the Queen from Shadowmoor. This is another commander card. Not a lot of printings. There's only 2 printings. It's uncommon from Shadowmoor. And then From the Vault was another print on it. Bloodghast is on here. That card's worth some small amount. Brain Freeze, Brainstorm is on here. Brazen Borrower, the Eldraine Showcase card is on here, which I thought was a little bit interesting. Burst Lightning, the Player's Reward version, the full art version is on here. Consul's Judgment, the Conspiracy 2 version, this card just saw a reprint in Double Masters, is on here. Quite a few cards. It's worth going through and just looking at it just so you're not completely surprised by what's going on. It's very clear that they picked this list kind of in the same spirit as the way they chose mystery boosters. It's supposed to be something that's cool to open. There's supposed to be a pretty wide spread. Eternal Witness is on here. That probably was something that needed a reprint. It's unlikely that these reprints will be available in large quantities, mainly because of how difficult it is to open some of these, right? If we were looking at a 25% rate to open them in a pack, so 1 in 4 packs to open one of these, and then from there it further scales down to the appropriate rarities for some of these cards. I imagine a Braid is probably falls in uncommon, for example. A Chroma's Memorial would probably be in the rare slot because it was rare in Future Sight, even though it was mythic in M13. So there's not really going to be a lot of these just because of how difficult it is to open them. Zendikar Rising does have a slightly higher cost as well. You have to remember that buying one of these boxes, there are only let's see, there's only 30 packs in a box versus there's only 30 packs in a box versus I'm sorry, I seem to be having some internet issues here. There's only 30 packs in a box versus 36 inside a draft box. If I pull up TCG Player, there is a bit of a difference in price, right? Zendikar Rising, your typical draft boosters, we're looking at probably about $100, more or less in line with your price. And then we have set boosters, they're about 30% more. The cheapest stores seem to be selling them at about $135 to $140 right now. So these are a little bit more expensive. This is something different. I imagine that this will probably do well in the sense that the first time this product is being released, people are probably more eager to get their hands on it, to try it out, to see what the packs are like. So this will be a fun experiment. I'm very curious to see how set boosters do. I'm curious to see what the distribution of set boosters to draft boosters most people keep in retail stores are. Prior to this, you know, if you're trying to do pre-orders, trying to get your allocation in, you had no choice. You basically had draft boosters, you had theme decks, you had bundles, some of these various other things. But now you have to choose between set boosters and draft boosters. You want to make sure that you probably have both. The idea is that you do have customers that will be wanting set boosters or will be wanting draft boosters. You have to be able to provide for both of them. So this is likely something we'll revisit again. We'll see how they do. We'll see how the list does. Probably have a store owner on in the future to take a look at it, to kind of go through and give their analysis and what their thoughts on the product are at some point. Moving onward, looking further down the page for their products, draft boosters, same idea, more or less the same distribution. You can find borderless cards. This seems to be kind of a common thing. They are available. Your just traditional non-foil borderless cards will be available inside draft boosters. Not really much to say there. Collector boosters will continue to exist in their current state. The note is collector boosters remain our high-end booster, chock full of the most exciting cards in Zendikar Rising. They're also the only place to open foil expeditions. The contents of a collector boosters are one foil expedition, one foil showcase, one foil borderless, or one foil extended art rare or mythic rare, one foil showcase common or uncommon, one showcase or borderless rare or mythic rare, two showcase commons or uncommons, one foil rare mythic rare, one extended art rare mythic rare, one foil full art basic land, two foil uncommons, five foil commons, one foil token. So in a pack, you're basically guaranteed 4 rares, 11 guaranteed 11 foils, and guaranteed 7 alternate art frame cards. So collector boosters is still kind of the same iteration they have existed before. Again, as noted, this is the only place to open foil expeditions. You can open up the normal ones inside the box toppers that come with set boosters, but if you want the foil versions, this collector boosters are going to be the only place to get them. It goes on to talk a little bit more about box toppers. 30 of the most exciting lands from the history of Magic. All 10 fetch lands are there. They do have a different frame compared to the previous expeditions. They're not standard legal, and they come in a booster box, draft or set. There will be one of these expeditions, and then inside a collector display, you should be opening up probably about 2 of them, and they'll be inside collector boosters as well. So the expedition box toppers are probably one of the most interesting things. This is, again, a throwback to treasures, back to the original expeditions themselves. it is interesting to note, and I think this is something that they've taken very well to, is that not everyone likes foils. So by having non-foils available, it does make these a little bit more attractive. We have seen this recently with the release of the Secret Lair set that they had dropped last week. You had the option of buying the Secret Lair in foil or non-foil. I think that's to appease both sides. It does increase the value of the non-foil probably a little bit more as a way for people to get a cool alternate art that's not just your traditional card face. These are all available on TCG Player now, so you can pre-order them. Most of them, if we pull up Scalding Tarn, most expensive fetch land, we see that they are pre-ordering. We have a seller that has two of them for $70, and then from there, you're probably looking about $100 plus for non-foil, and then about $200 for the foil version. I think this is a cool way to do it. By introducing these, it does kind of give a full spectrum of product that's available to people. I think that was one of the things that kind of hurt them with Double Masters, was just creating VIP packs and just traditional booster packs. Here, they know that there's a larger market. This is something that we discussed yesterday concerning the reserve lists. They do have a market. They want to be able to have a product for everyone, no matter how deep their wallet is or what their interests are in terms of Magic. You want some of these high-end alternate art collectible cards that are going to maintain value. They're going to be there. If you're looking for just your cheapest version that you can play with, they'll be there. It is worth noting that this will certainly do some pretty interesting things to the value of the set itself. If we look at the set and I sort by price from market price, high to low, and TCG Player, this isn't perfect, mainly because I imagine not every store has their pre-orders readily available yet. If we sort the price high to low, the majority of the cards that come up are going to be the extended art versions, obviously, showcase versions, etc. So the cards are doing well right now. Your most expensive card is Lithoform Engine. This is, of course, the artifact, the legendary artifact mythic. Implications are very, very heavy towards EDH. This is clearly meant to be a casual play. This copies abilities, it forks a spell, and it creates a copy of a permanent. All these big, splashy, geared towards Commander. No surprise that this is doing well. It's the highest... This is the most expensive card in the set for pre-order. The second is Ancient Green Warden. This is, of course, the green mythic. Reach, you can play lands from your graveyard, and if a land causes a trigger ability to trigger, it will trigger a second time. So your landfall triggers will trigger twice. Second most expensive card. From there, we see a few other cards that are reasonably pricey, but from there it starts to fall off pretty hard. I imagine once more sellers start to introduce their pre-orders to these online platforms, we'll see the prices start to go down. But Zendikar Rising, not unlike a lot of the sets before where we have a lot of premium products, we've seen this with Throne of Eldraine since it was introduced last fall. Whenever there's high premium cards that encourage people to open up a lot of product, we see prices be largely depressed. And what that means is when people are wanting to open up these cards, right? For example, if people need to open up a certain amount of product to have all the Expedition box toppers, right? If people are trying to open up set boosters to have a full set of the list available for sale, they're going to need to be opening up a lot of product. Someone did napkin math earlier on Twitter. I remember browsing through and looking at it. Someone had said that you'd probably need to be opening approximately 40 boxes of the set boosters in order to open up to guarantee that you open up one of every list card. With standard deviation, you could possibly be needing to open up more than that. And as a result, if people are opening up that much product, that means that your cards, your traditional mythics, rares, are going to be heavily depressed in price because there's going to be so many out there. Simply due to the virtue of people just opening up a ton of product. So when that happens, usually we see an initial rush. The stores are opening up a ton of product at the beginning. Will likely be listing cards for sale in large volume to try and make it up. And as a result, it quickly becomes a race to the bottom as sellers are looking for ways to recuperate their costs to be able to pay back their distributors for their pre-orders. They're incentivized to sell. And usually on release weekend is when we see prices hit the bottom. A lot of stores don't necessarily have the means to be able to ship out a large volume of pre-orders early. The way sets usually come out is the Thursday before the release date, or not the Thursday, I'm sorry, the Tuesday or Wednesday. Distributors will be shipping out the product, and usually stores are getting them in. The lucky stores get them in on Thursday. Most stores get them in on Wednesday. And then it becomes a race against time. A lot of stores are forced to open up product very quickly. Anything that they do want to open, they basically have Wednesday and Thursday to open up all the products, sort all the product, list the product. If they want to do pre-orders, they need to get it online onto their website, online platforms. They're trying to do it as quickly as possible. So Thursday is realistically when most stores get it done. So there's a small window for pre-orders to happen, and then Friday they start shipping them out. Some amount of product probably gets open on Friday as well. Previously, when people would come to the stores, we usually saw a huge influx of people that were opening up their product and wanting to sell their product right away. Those are usually hitting the online platforms, and that was really your best window to be buying your product. I generally tend to steer away from pre-orders, mainly because of how inefficient pre-ordering is. It's kind of a catch-22. It's kind of a bad boat for both players to be in, both parties to be in, rather. As a consumer, if I buy from an online store, a lot of stores that perhaps don't have the best business practices will likely refund, especially if the card goes up in value. I've seen the full range of excuses from we're overstocked, or we oversold, to just people wanting to cancel because they know that card that they pre-sold for $5, they can now get $15 for. That's just the nature of pre-ordering. Conversely, as a seller, I know a lot of people will choose to cancel their order. I think it's a pretty lousy policy, mainly because this allows people to basically speculate risk-free. A lot of people will choose to purchase large quantities of cards on pre-order, and then if the card doesn't go up in price like they expect it to, they'll choose to cancel. I think this is a pretty big feel bad for both sides. I don't really think either behavior is acceptable on the side of the seller or on the side of the buyer. So for the most part, I really do steer clear of pre-orders. I really wait until release day at either the Thursday before, the Friday of, or that weekend, that first Saturday and Sunday weekend to order. I usually think that's the best window to be ordering anyways. I think that is usually when supply peaks. That's when you have a lot of stores that sell large volume. That's when those stores are starting to put things on the market. And with kind of the race, as I mentioned before, the race to the bottom with stores undercutting each other, trying to guarantee they make their sales, usually that's when you can find the best deals. So I do expect a lot of these cards to go down in price. For the most part, it doesn't seem like the EV on the set itself is particularly high. There's a lot of busts. Most of your cards are not going to be terribly expensive. There are some cards that will always do well that probably have a fairly high floor. The bimodal dual lands, the flip lands that will produce one of each. They'll produce one mana of each color, depending on which side you choose, or of a color rather. Those will probably always do well. You probably have some commanders that will do well. People seem to like the planeswalkers, right? Jace and Nahiri. Whether or not they're the most competitive cards, I don't really see them falling below a certain price. the mythic spells slash lands. I imagine those will be fairly popular. But for the most part, I do expect a lot of these cards to go down in price. I think the majority of the value of the set is in the higher end cards, is inside the box toppers, the masterpieces. Depending on how the set plays out, I don't really see cards from the set being substantial enough to decrease the value on them. Someone did do a breakdown on the monetary value of the cards in the set by price. I think they had done it by like less than $1, less than $5, less than $10, etc. The set is kind of a different animal because it's the first time that we've seen it in person. We'll have to kind of wait to see how it plays out. And we'll see what impact it has on the market itself, on the reprints from there. In addition to set boosters, with set boosters containing 4 rares in each pack. From a box of 30, you're opening up a box that has 120 rares and mythics inside. If we see a lot of people opening up set boosters, we are going to see a lot of cards be very, very heavily depressed in price. And realistically, the only cards that may maintain value would probably be some of the very top-end extended art or alternate art showcase cards. But even if you look at some of the past sets, Throne of Eldraine, Theros, Core 21, Ikoria, even the extended art showcase cards really aren't worth that much, especially if you're still able to open them up inside draft boosters. And with the sheer volume of people that do open collector boosters and how much they like them, a lot of them really aren't going to be worth that much. So it remains to be seen. We'll have to kind of wait to see how it plays out, to see how set boosters really impacts the market. I think it is going to be a bit of a waiting game. That being said, they did make an announcement yesterday. There's a bit of a wrench. Production updates. This was posted yesterday on the main website. And I quote, "Due to production issues, some Zendikar Rising and Commander Legend products will experience delays at launch. Initial allocations of Zendikar Rising will be arriving in North American locations in 2 waves. The first wave will be at the intended launch date of September 25th. The second wave will arrive in stores 7 to 10 days after the first wave's launch. As a result, some locations may experience limited availability until the second wave arrives. Additionally, Zendikar Rising bundles in North America and the Asia Pacific region will be delayed and will arrive in stores as soon as possible, though they are unlikely to be available at launch. Production delays have also pushed back the release of Commander Legends collector boosters, which will now release November 20th. This shift only affects collector boosters. All other Commander Legends products are still on track to release November 6th. However, in the Asia Pacific region, Commander decks associated with Commander Legends will be released on November 20th. Finally, regarding Jumpstart, we expect to have updates on these shipments very soon, and we'll share that information as soon as we are able. We appreciate your continued patience during these delays. We know excitement for these products is high, and we plan to deliver them as quickly as possible under the circumstances." This is a big deal. This is something that they've brought up before. There have been a consistent stream of issues that are usually coming with these releases. We have mentioned that product is usually allocated. This is something that Rusty had mentioned when he was with us, the owner of Next Switch Games, last week. Michael Caffrey earlier this week, he had also experienced the same thing. This is something that we should see across the board. It's no surprise that production issues will exist given the current era that we live in. This is just going to be the reality of the situation. This is something that I foresee them being able to fix in the future. But for now, initially, I do expect that we will see a pinch in supply at the very beginning of Zendikar Rising coming out. That release weekend, your store may not be able to fulfill. I pulled up Card Kingdom's page here to look at their pre-orders, and on the front page, they actually have a little pop-up window that talks about the shipping delays. This is something that they announced yesterday. It's a short article, and the first paragraph, "Yesterday we received word that we will only receive 50% of the Zendikar Rising set, draft and collector boosters we ordered in time for the set's release on September 25th. We also learned that the bundles will not be available to ship by release. In light of this news, we have chosen to briefly pause our presale to prevent overselling. Card Kingdom, one of the largest online vendors in this industry, they're getting 50% of what they had ordered. That's a pretty substantial drop-off. That's a pretty big deal. I do think that this will affect pre-order prices a little bit. Initially, I think the pre-orders may be a little bit higher. If you're looking to pre-order right now, the same supply that we may have enjoyed in the past may not be there. If a lot of stores are expecting now that they will not get their full allocation, it's possible we will see stores maybe cut back on how many stores they list. If previously, if your store was going to expected to be able to list 20 of each mythic, and they're similarly getting cut, they only expecting to receive 50% of what they had ordered, they may cut back and only have 10 available of a mythic for pre-order. That's going to be a big deal, I think, especially, and we're not counting the stores that may be a little bit more timid about this. They're unsure about the pre-order process itself. They may not be choosing to, do pre-orders at all. In the example of Card Kingdom here, they've chosen to pause their pre-sale entirely. We see a lot of cards are just out of stock at this point. I assume that's because with this allocation in mind, they're choosing to back off and ensure that rather than risk overselling, they're just going to cut back, let items be out of stock, and then once product rolls in, once they have the cards on hand, once they have the product on hand, they'll slowly open up the floodgates and let those products be available again to people. So where does that leave us? That kind of leaves us in a bit of a sticky situation. I'm very sympathetic towards stores that have to deal with. This is something that this is the era of COVID-19. This is the reality we live in. These are simply things that we're going to have to deal with. That's just kind of the reality. We do see production issues generally across the board from a full spectrum of things, even just in our everyday life. The initial article itself, it mentioned that Commander Legends boosters will also be pushed back towards the holiday season. That will probably generate a little bit more excitement since it does fall in line a little bit more with Christmas and the holidays and people spending money in large volumes for gifts. But for right now, looking at Zendikar itself, looking at the Zendikar Rising, the different products that are being released, I do think this will dampen people's excitement for it. People usually want their product right away. It becomes less exciting once it's more readily available. But there's just so many different products. There's so many different things that are trying to do here. It's hard to say if the bad news is really going to, how much it's going to overshadow the good news, as it were. The good news being that they have a new product, set boosters. This is something that I keep going back to. We're really going to see how well set boosters do for them. If it ends up being a complete flop, there may be some issues with it going forward. In my mind, I think set boosters are going to be a more efficient way for stores to be opening up product. There's a pretty large disparity between set boosters and draft boosters, right? If we're looking at up to 4 rares per pack. In theory, you could open up quite a few rares per box. This may be a little bit more efficient than opening up draft boosters. You end up with a lot of chaff when you open up draft boosters. So set boosters, I really have mixed responses about them. We'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. I imagine that there's going to be kind of initial rush for it. Once people know that, hey, there's a shortage, people are going to be wanting to pre-order, trying to get their pre-orders in as quickly as possible. In turn, that creates kind of a panic buy. If all of a sudden your store is sold out of their pre-order allocation, and then you have a customer call, they say, hey, I want to order some set boosters, I want to get a full box available on release day, and then the store says, oh, we don't know if we can fulfill that. We've already sold through our initial allotment for pre-order. Now you're going to start creating panic. This person might start calling a different game store, wanting to pre-order, and then now we kind of have this panic buy that we see people just wanting to go out, getting the set boosters right away. They'll be doing whatever it takes to get them. We may see pre-orders online. They may disappear a little bit faster. The prices may go up higher than anticipated initially. If you are in the market for this, I would encourage you to be patient. As with most things, do your research. If you can afford to be patient, then wait. As they mentioned, they do expect a second wave to come in, probably about a week later. If you don't get it the first week, it's really not that big a deal. It's probably better worth waiting a week just to let prices calm, let prices settle. You may not be able to capitalize and cash in on high demand things right away, but if your goal is simply to open up product and have fun, I would encourage waiting. For prices for product across the board, there's going to be a balance. We're going to have to see how stores deal with this allocation, with how they're going to deal with pre-orders. If their supply is pinched, they may not be able to go all in as they usually do. I imagine, again, most stores would probably be a little bit more conservative about the actions they take. We'll have to see how it affects them. Usually at the top end, right? The things that are probably of most interested people, how are the expeditions going to play out? The expeditions, these masterpieces, they've kind of been fairly hotly contended since they were initially released with Zendikar, with Amonkhet, all these sets, Kaladesh, these sets that did masterpieces. It really does kind of throw a curveball in terms of value, in terms of expected value of a box. When Michael Caffrey was on earlier this week, we kind of discussed about the potential for these box toppers, what they look like in terms of price. If we just pull up TCG Player, we sort of high to low. Fetches are obviously leading the pack. There's not a lot of listings for them, so some of the data is probably a bit more pinched than usual. There are some pretty interesting cards on here. It's worth noting that the Battle Bond cycle, Sea of Clouds, Morphic Pool, Bountiful Promenade, Luxury Suite, and Spire Garden, they're in the full cycle here. This is technically a reprint in the sense that there is no other printing for this, but being a box topper, not really that available. You can't really open up a booster, right? If you want to open one, you're basically looking at buying a full box and taking a chance with the Expedition box topper in there. We'll have to kind of see how this plays out in terms of value for the overall box. Fetches are obviously at the top end. There's a full cycle of 10 fetches. There are some premium lands in here. Cavern of Souls, Prismatic Vista. This is the first reprint for Prismatic Vista from Modern Horizons. Again, use reprint however you will. Wasteland is in here. Ancient Tomb is in here. Horizon Canopy is in here. Strip Mine. Blackleaf Cliffs is in here. We do see Celestial Colonnade and Creeping Tar Pit as the only man lands to be in here. There's not the full cycle of them because the rest of them are kind of bad. We do have the Scars lands. Again, technically the first reprint on them, right? We have Seachrome Coast, Darkslick Shores, Blackleaf Cliffs is the one that really sees the most play. There's a pretty good spread of lands. I wouldn't really say there are any lands in here that are truly bad. Some of them are a little bit less desirable than others. Creeping Tar Pit, not the most exciting one. Grove of the Burn Willows, nowhere near as expensive as it once was. Reprints have kind of brought it down. The reprint equity on that card is kind of low. It's not really the most exciting card to open. So we'll kind of have to see what these do. I do suspect that they'll come down a little bit more from where they are. Right now we have the fetch lands, right, about $70 for the most expensive ones if you pre-order now. Misty Rainforest, Verdant Catacomb, Scalding Tarn. The rest of them are a little bit behind that, and then we have a fair amount that are in the $30 to $40 range. And then kind of the bottom of the barrel, we're looking at $20 for the Battle Bond lands, Grove of the Burn Willows, some of the lesser played Scars of Meriden lands, etc. I do think these are still a little bit too high, to be perfectly honest. if we average the price out, right now they're about we average the price out. I think it takes up a little bit too much value inside a box. Michael had described it as if the value of the expected value of the box is too high, boxes won't be sold. It would be more profitable for stores to just open them. This is something we may see at the start, but I imagine as a lot of these hit the market, once we kind of get past our initial constriction on supply, once the full allotment comes in, stores are able to get this readily available again, these prices will probably come down, I imagine, another 20% from where they are now. That's probably my buy-in point. If I were to look for cards I want to put my money into, I would probably wait once they kind of hit the depression, once we get past that point of just mass box opening. That's probably when supply will be the highest, and then and probably it'll be the cheapest time to buy them at that point. I do think these are reasonable buys. Some of them are getting a little bit tougher because reprint equity, once it goes away and once there's more options for people to buy, then it becomes hard to sell each individual version of a card. So yesterday when we discussed reprint equity with Scalding Tarn, right, now we have 5 options for Scalding Tarn. We have the Zendikar Modern Masters with the traditional card frame. We have the Secret Lair version, kind of a premium version, does have the traditional frame, not really that available. We have the foil Battle for Zendikar version that was foil only. That one's pretty expensive. A lot of people that do like foils, they don't necessarily like the expedition art. A lot of people do seem to prefer the traditional Zendikar foil if they're looking to get the most expensive and rarest version for their deck. And now we have these new expeditions. Now, because there's so many different variations, it's starting to become a little bit difficult to pinpoint each individual one. Their liquidity for each one goes down because now this version of Scalding Tarn is competing with the foil expedition from Battle for Zendikar version, right? The non-foil versions have to compete with the Secret Lair that has alternate art or the original Zendikar version. Each individual version that comes out makes it a little bit more difficult to buy. The liquidity goes down, so investing in some of these may be a little bit difficult. Prismatic Vista is fairly interesting. Prismatic Vista is a very playable card, obviously. This is, again, the first reprint. So there's only 3 versions of this card if we're looking at it. We have this Zendikar Rising version, non-foil and foil, and then we have the original Modern Horizons foil and non-foil versions. Not a lot of choices, so it may be a little bit more interesting for people to look at a card like Prismatic Vista. It may be a good buy, just in terms of options that are available to players, and the things that they may be the most interested in. Ancient Tomb, kind of in the same boat as Scalding Tarn. Ancient Tomb, overall, if we look at printings, if I type in Ancient Tomb, we now have 5 total printings of it prior to this being released. The initial print was from Tempest. The second printing was a From the Vault Realms. That was foil only. Ancient Tomb in Zendikar Expeditions, Battle for Zendikar, that was the second printing of it, technically. Again, also foil only. So we have 1 original foil printing from Tempest, 2 foil printings, and then it wouldn't be until Ultimate Masters 2018 when Ancient Tomb is now both a non-foil, you can get the card inside the set, and then you also have the box topper that is foil only. And now with the introduction of Zendikar Rising, the Expeditions, now there's both a foil version and a non-foil version. There's a lot of choices. So in my mind, Ancient Tomb would kind of be a card that I steer away from. There's a point when the Masterpiece Ancient Tomb was much more than it was now. Right now, it's available on TCG Player for the cheapest copy, $131. This used to be much higher, kind of when there were fewer premium options to choose from. But now that players, again, reprint equity, it's getting kind of low on this card. It's not becoming the most exciting card to reprint because if people just want to open up this card and play this card, you can just buy a non-foil version from Ultimate Masters or Tempest. If you're looking to really kind of get premium versions, now people have to choose between, do they like the Zendikar Expedition, do they like the Zendikar Rising Expedition, or do they like the box topper? So that's kind of our first look. I think there's a lot to go through. I would encourage you to go back and read the articles, review the list, think about the cards that are on here, look at the cards that are on here. There are some cards that will definitely be hurt by this. It's pretty interesting. For example, Emrakul's Aeon's Torn. I'm just still kind of scrolling through a list. I haven't really processed the full list and everything that's on it yet. Emrakul Aeon's Torn, the original Rise of the Eldrazi version, is being reprinted. Emrakul has always been just kind of one of that like big, flashy, marquee Eldrazi that people think of. It's a mythic. It's unlikely they'll be heavily impacted in price. But again, this is all speculation. We have to see what set boosters look like, what they do going forward, and how well they play out. So that's a lot to cover. There's a lot going on. Zendikar Rising, it feels like the products are getting more and more complex each time. If you look at the original article, there's actually more product from Zendikar Rising that I didn't really go over. I went over the majority of the interesting ones, but there are theme boosters, there's commander decks, there's welcome boosters, there's bundle and gift editions, right? All these things, there's a lot of product. It really does feel like Wizards is trying to encapsulate what it means to be a customer and to have something that is available for everyone. In theory, no one should feel like they're getting priced out in a form. There is some sort of premium product. There's some cool product that is available to everyone. I think that Zendikar Rising will do very well. People have already generally always had love for Zendikar in terms of flavor. People love the plane itself. Usually we know that fetch lands, when they're introduced in a set in any capacity, even if it's kind of a premium only product, it still does well. It's, again, a way for people to get their hands on fetch lands when they otherwise would not be able to do so very easily. So we'll see how it plays out. It's likely, again, I will have another retailer come on, and at some point they'll kind of do a rehash on what they had to deal with for Zendikar Rising, what their strategy was going in, how much they pre-ordered, how much they got allocated. We'll kind of look at that going forward. That being said, that'll wrap up what we have here today. Take a look at all this information. It's available on the Wizards website for people that want a little bit more information about any of this, anything that I recapped in this episode. As always, I'm Ed Nguyen. You can find me on Twitter at edwin13. You can find the social media sites for Vermilion on the right. As always, stay safe out there. In Portland, it's actually, I live in Portland, Oregon. We're having some interesting weather outside, as it were. There are some pretty big wildfires across the state. So the sky is kind of in a very hazy, yellowish color. It's a little bit eerie. It's been this way for a few days while they combat the fires. I actually lost power for a period of time. So it's been going on in the real world. I know other people, especially in the Bay Area, are facing similar difficulties as well. Wherever you are in the world, do stay safe. And then we will see you back here tomorrow.